So, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It is now October, and that means that we are in Cybersecurity Awareness Month. As an academic institution, it is our mission to empower people with knowledge and the skills to improve their lives and build their careers. That's our mission as at Thomas Edison State University. And on that note, I am thrilled to have our esteemed speakers and panelists today. I'm going to go over a very brief introduction of them. So we have here today Dr. Henry Collier, who's now serving as the Dean of the School of Science and Technology here at Thomas Edison State University. Dr. Collier is an internationally renowned and recognized cybersecurity expert who's specializing in human firewall. Also, his specialties and expertise are in AI and networking. He currently leads global research on cultural factors influencing susceptibility to cybercrime. We also have Dr. Susan Cole, who's an information system security officer at iTech. Dr. Cole brings over 2 decades of hands-on cybersecurity experience spanning incident response, policy development, and security operations. She holds a PhD in information assurance and has been teaching cybersecurity professionals since 2002. Currently, she is a mentor here at Thomas Edison State University, and I've been lucky to have her on a lot of course projects with our program. We also have another great mentor that we have and subject matter expert, Dr. Denise Kinsey Bergstrom. She is the program chair for cybersecurity at Franklin University. Denise brings over 20 years of experience in computer networking and cybersecurity for both government and private sector clients. She also serves as a mentor here at Thomas Edison University. She also works as an SME and subject matter expert for the revisions and a lot of course projects within the cybersecurity program. In addition to the great mentors and subject matter experts, we have two of our own graduates, Thomas Edison State University alumni, here today to share and discuss their experience and also give us some sort of tips about studying here at Thomas Edison and also how they fit in the workforce. We have Michael Garrity, who's the Chief Information Security Officer for the state of New Jersey and a Director of New Jersey Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Cell. He leads the development and the execution of the state cybersecurity strategy, including operations, governance, risk and compliance, and also incident response. He was a class of 2009 here at Thomas Edison University. We also have another great graduate with us today, John Rosario, who's a network operations engineer at 365 Data Centers. He was a Master of Science in Cybersecurity in 2025. He was also in our Bachelor of Science program in Cybersecurity back in 2024. He was one of our accelerated pathway for the Bachelor to Master program. And John is a network and data security professional who accelerated his career by completing both his bachelor's and master's degrees in cybersecurity through our accelerated program. So thank you everyone for being here and being with us today. Now, to set the tone and hopefully make everyone interested in the topic and the discussions, I want to start by this kind of question. Why these talks in general, talking about cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness in particular, is almost relevant for everyone these days. It is not just the IT experts or the people who are involved in finance or let's say business in particular. They should be worried about or they should be aware of cybersecurity hygiene. Why is it important? Why these talks are important, and how is it relevant to everyone these days?
Sure, thanks, Saeed. So cybersecurity is something that really needs to be approached from every single person in an organization. I am under the belief, as are most of my peers, that cybersecurity is the responsibility of everybody, not just the security team, not just the IT team. And the big component to that is because we are the #1 target for the threat actors, right? It takes days, weeks, months, years to hack a piece of equipment. Yes, they're doing that. They're getting in that way. But it takes a lot less time to hack a person and to convince them to fall for a phishing attempt. So that's why, humans are the #1 threat to all networks. It's the easiest pathway in. It's the most reliable pathway in. And that's why we get targeted that way. So again, cybersecurity is important to all of us because we should take ownership of our own security posture. We should be of the mindset that I'm going to do everything I can to protect myself individually, right, from fraud, from other cyber events, to protecting the organization that I work for. And that's kind of a cultural piece that I think we need to work on a little bit more, because some people tend to believe that, oh, it's the organization's responsibility, it's not mine. Well, no, that's not true. It is every single person's responsibility. And I've been in cyber a long time, and I've seen that mentality change quite a bit over the years. But as the threats have continued to expand, continued to become more sophisticated, we're seeing a need more that every single person is cyber aware, and that we're conscious about what we're clicking on. We are conscious about what emails we're responding to. I mean, if you didn't expect the email coming in, assume that it's malicious until you prove otherwise. And that's a safe way to approach it. And that would significantly reduce a lot of problems. So I think that's the most important piece, is that cybersecurity is everybody's responsibility.
Thank you. You brought a lot of interesting points, and I think we're going to touch them later, also, of course, in terms of the human factor within the process. But you also mentioned about the new technology or the new threats. So I want to ask everyone here and see how can we picture and how can we discuss the evolving threat landscape? We talk a lot about these days, of course, the buzzwords, AI is out there, everyone talks about it. What are the most significant emerging threats that organizations, institutions, and people in general, the consumers of the cyber world, are affected and we are experiencing these days? How can you describe this emerging threats, and what are they? And again, what might be some lessons or tips that a consumer like myself should know?
I would have to say that the biggest threat that we're seeing right now is the actual implementation of AI tools being used in the world of cybersecurity. Certainly, we have, on the defensive side, we have looked at how we can implement AI as a defensive measure to strengthen our defenses, but the threat actors are also using it as a way to target, whether it's developing new malware that it can escape and evade the current security systems significantly easier, or developing social engineering schemes that you simply can't tell that it's a phishing attempt by looking at it. It looks absolutely legitimate. That's one of the biggest threats that we're facing right now, I think.
I'll weigh in on this one. So my perspective is a little bit different. I've spent over 20 years as a federal government contractor. So a lot of people do know about APT and a lot of people don't know. So I try to always explain it. APT, Advanced Persistent Threat, it was coined by the Air Force in the 2000s. And it means that you're dealing with an adversary who has advanced, so custom hacking, zero-day attempts. They're persistent. They want to stay in your network, not just days or weeks, but months and years to get that intelligence. And they have a threat, so they're funded and they're well developed, and so this usually means another nation state. So APT, I would say, is probably one of the biggest threats that we have. And in the federal government, things like zero trust have come about as a way to kind of combat. And the assumption is that you've already been had. They're already there. The question is, how can we limit what they get access to? So that continues to be a developing threat. And of course, now with AI and the tools that they're using are more and more advanced, and it's harder and harder to keep up with this.
I think you brought up an interesting topic. A lot of these threats and these kind of patience from the bad actor side, we can see in a lot of national and international crimes. It basically becomes a cyber warfare, if you will. We can have bad actors, and now we also see some of these threats are not just by a single random person. It might be a sponsored team or even a government behind some of those activities. So
I'm going to build on what Susan just said. Nation state threat actors, obviously the advanced persistent threats, whether it's China's MSS or Russia's SVR. Obviously, those are going to have national security implications for the United States, state of New Jersey, whatever it may be. They have resources that most organizations don't have. In fact, China has more MSS hackers, if you will, or intelligence folks that are hacking into systems on a daily basis, then all of the FBI has agents. It's a 10-to-1 ratio there. And so when we think about those nation state actors, they're going after critical infrastructure in the United States. And we saw that over the past year or so with Volt Typhoon, where they hacked into telecommunication systems, energy systems, water systems, so on and so forth. So we've got nation state actors. They're going to be primarily interested in strategic pre-positioning or strategic objectives, whether it's the economy for their nations or whatnot. We also have those transnational cybercrime syndicates. So when we think of ransomware gangs like Lockbit or Clop or any of the newer ones that are coming out, they're going to be financially motivated, and they've been hitting everything and anything that is vulnerable. It's not necessarily how valuable you are, it's how vulnerable you are, holding for ransom, whether it's data or whatnot. So we see them. Hacktivist groups, those are ideological motivated individuals and groups. And we see that all the time. We've had hacks into systems, water systems here in New Jersey, and elsewhere in the country by, Iranian-backed threat actors that were hacktivists, but also working with the state. We've had it from Russian hacktivist groups as well. And then we have, I'll play off of the APT, the Advanced Persistent Teenagers. So the FBI Newark office recently went over to the UK, working with UK authorities, arrested and indicted a number of members of the Scattered Spider, and Shiny Hunters and some of these other groups that are over there. They're 17 to 22-year-old kids that are hacking into MGM and Caesars and all sorts of organizations by social engineering. And holding them for ransom. In fact, one of the kids was 22 years old. He had $200 million. That's not an advertisement for students here to take on cybersecurity as not as a defender, but as an offensive person. But it's something when you consider there's a lot of money to be made in cybercrime.
And I'll add to that, it's not just a lot of money to be made, it's a lot of money to be lost. Because as we become more and more tied to the grid and we put everything online, we have more to lose because we have less resources that we can access that will be offline in the event that something takes us down. Let's just look at the AWS outage this week, right? They're still not sure what happened. Was it DNS? Was it bad actors? It's been tossed around many different times. In addition to that, with AI, we're at risk of our companies and our proprietary data, our confidential content, which is what makes us special and separate, being put out there by well-intentioned but lack of understanding employees who are putting that copywritten and protected material out there onto public AI systems and trying to improve their writing or increase their productivity. But now that becomes part of what feeds a system. And those advances and competitive advantages may now become something that's more public. Plus, we can use AI in a nefarious way. It's easier now to take snippets of people's conversations and voice prints and try to make it sound like somebody saying something else with those calls about somebody being kidnapped or somebody being ransomed and things like that. So with everything that my colleagues have said, it is the urgency because other countries are stepping up their game. AI can be used for malware and for additional ways to try to get into our systems. We're increasing our use of all these integrated systems, and we are ignorant of what we don't know. So especially our kids, they start using these games and don't realize the accesses that they're giving, the permissions they're giving, the ways they're being basically stalked. And, the more we rely on this technology, the more vulnerable we become.
To add to the conversation as well, everyone mentioned earlier, Dr. Collier earlier mentioned how cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility. The one key area where I see a rising amount of threats emerging is specifically spear phishing. AI has made it a lot easier to not only spoof official communications, but also video calls, voice messages, other means of communication. So that loops back into the other comment about being careful about what we post onto social media and what kind of information we post on there. All of these TikToks that provide 10 to 20 second to 30 second voice snippets, that's enough for a language model to be trained in order to mimic a voice. Now, once you have that person's voice, there's been scenarios where executive assistants have received a phone call from an alleged VP or another person that they report to, requesting information to be sent to a specific email or requesting a money transfer to a specific account. And these are just some general examples that I've observed and that have occurred. Another part of this, the AI tools that are available, is that everyone has to be a lot more conscious of what is the newest tool and how it can be used. Because even though you may not use a tool, the bad guys are always out there studying what is the new tool on the block and how can I use that to steal, lure, lie, obfuscate, or in general do bad things with it to organizations. Because at the end of the day, we are in a business of protecting companies and protecting data and keeping that information private as it should be and confidential. We also have to recognize the teams and the people that we are facing. We're facing teenagers, we're facing young people that have nothing but time to sit around and break things until it works. And they only have to get it right once in order to be successful.
I want to, before we kind of shift gears, I want to see if there is anything in particular when, Michael, you brought up the organized big threats that are targeting maybe infrastructure. Are there any lessons or any best practices that I can follow or is for general public to be aware or to kind of help the good guys with respect to protecting the infrastructure, all those big resources? Because I personally always, for example, the AWS issue, I feel that I didn't have anything to do with it, or I couldn't have played any role in protecting or defending against this attack. Are there any practices, any lessons, any information that I should know that I can help to protect the infrastructure, and the big companies, or that is just the sole responsibility of the security officers at that company?
As far as an individual, they're not going to change how AWS does business. That's up to them to do that. However, if you are a cybersecurity leader within an organization dependent on AWS or Microsoft Azure or Google Cloud, those are things you've got to consider as far as your supply chain and what resilience it has, what effect an outage like AWS is going to have on you. If it's a minimal outage and it doesn't affect your business or you as an individual, that's not something you're going to worry about. But if, a lot of the companies that, were in that US East AWS region, they weren't also in US West. So they didn't have that redundancy that was necessary. So there's a lot of things to think about. But as an individual, forget about AWS, forget about all of those different things. Any of those services that we use online that have our personal information. It could be your Gmail account, it could be your social media account, it could be your bank account. Number one, use multi-factor authentication. We talk about AI, we talk about exploiting vulnerabilities. Latest reports, 81% of the hacks nowadays is based on compromised credentials. You're using a password where the bad actor logs in as you rather than hacks in. So using multi-factor authentication is going to reduce your risk so much that you're not even an attractive target for most organizations unless you're a very important person or have access to certain things. So
to add what Michael was just mentioning, right, with the credential set, we know that on the dark web, credentials are all over the place. Anytime that there is a breach of a system and the threat actor is able to secure credential sets, they turn around and they sell them on the dark web. So they're all over the place. And he's absolutely right. Multi-factor authentication is the key to stopping that. Because if they don't have your app on your phone or they don't have your phone number for if you're receiving a text, right, they're not going to get logged in. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I get notifications from my Hotmail account that somebody in Nigeria is trying to log into my account. Well, guess what? I have MFA on it. You're not getting in, right? So you're absolutely right, Michael. MFA is a huge component, and I think organizations need to require it of their employees, not make it optional. When it's optional, people will not want to do it because it's inconvenient. But if it's required, they will. And that'll help justify and save everything we're dealing with.
So in the NJKIC, one of the things we do is we harvest those credentials off the dark web. All public sector organizations in the state of New Jersey, and we do those notifications to say, hey, John Doe at Thomas Edison had his credentials compromised, have him change his password, and so on and so forth. The university sector, okay, whether it be Thomas Edison, NJIT, Rutgers, they are so far ahead of having their passwords compromised than all the other sectors combined. So having multi-factor authentication on your student accounts, on your Gmail accounts, on your Facebook accounts, so on and so forth is so important. We've done 57,000 notifications just this year in 2025. 57,000 is a pretty lot of, of notifications.
I would add not to compromise yourself. So if you're using MFA, folks, I know that we want to be connected. I know that we want to be part of the game, part of the activity. But on Facebook, when you're asked what your favorite food is, or what your favorite pet is, or where you went to high school, while those may seem innocuous, and maybe the person who posted it really was just trying to get a conversation going, think about it for a second. Those are the kinds of information that are required when you reset a password. So you can be giving the hacker the credential information that is needed to reset your password. So now it's just sidestepped the whole MFA situation, created the account, locked you out potentially, and there's a real serious issue there. So while we want to be inclusive and we want to be part of the group and we want to have the fun that everyone's having, be very careful about how you do those things. And something that I do personally is so that if anybody does know, for example, I went to a high school that had a panther as the mascot. I will never use panther as one of the answers for a question, and I don't use this one, so I'm not giving anything away, but what you could use is black cat. So instead of panther, you still know what it is by the question, but you're not giving an answer that anybody else will be able to replicate. They'll type in panther and it will be denied. So protect yourself that way, because multi-factor is essential, but also protecting the content that is built into the multi-factor is also essential.
Yeah, you make a very good point, Denise. It's something that we really need to think about, that information that we let out there, like on social media, when people answer all those questions. When I get those things, and I got to tell you, I get on Facebook, I think twice a year just to check to see who I went to high school with that has died. I don't get on it hardly at all. But, it's funny when I get those and I just laugh and go, yeah, right, buddy, I'm not answering that. But it goes beyond just on social media, right? I recently moved here to New Jersey to be the dean. And so I started looking at various organizations to join for various recreational activities. And recently I was going to apply to one, but most of the questions they were asking on their application were PII or, security questions. Like they wanted to know my date of birth. Yeah, I'm not giving you that. They wanted to know where I was born. Not giving you that. What next? You're going to ask me for my mother's maiden name? So you got to be aware beyond in every aspect of your life, because if that organization isn't going to necessarily target me, but if that data gets compromised through that organization, somebody else now has it.
Absolutely. And even with the bank, when I set up my bank accounts, my mother's maiden name is not my mother's maiden name. It is a word that I will always know, so that any of these genealogy sites, or if you go out there to whitepages.com or anything else, they're not going to see me associated with anyone with this name because I made it up. And so it's, again, another layer of protection. Now you have to remember that, but it's something associated with me that I'm going to remember, just like the example of the panther as the mascot being translated into the black cat. As opposed to it being a literal answer.
Yep.
To add to the conversation, I would say password complexity is another big one that must be enforced at the organizational level and also practiced personally. I personally always enjoy coming up with exceedingly rare and weird looking passwords, because I know for a fact this is not something that you'll be able to run through an algorithm and crack it within 5 minutes. And that comes down to the combination of letters, special characters, numbers, as well as the length of the password. Those are the three key factors. As I'm sure everyone here is aware, a study was recently conducted where a password that was 8 to 12 characters can be cracked in less than 5 minutes by most cracking tools. So that's another thing to keep in mind, along with changing up the password every 90 days or so, especially for specific accounts that may be valuable or have very sensitive information. You want to always switch up those passwords, because although it is comfortable to keep using the same password for a number of years or months, you also have to keep in mind, if there's a breach and they get passwords from 6 months ago or whatever the case is, did you change it within the interim? Whether you did or not can literally save your accounts, save your data security.
While we were great points. I think I got a couple of comments in the chat, and one of them was, I wish we had more companies allowing for pass phrases as opposed to a password, just a phrase for that. I know some of services allow for that. And also there's another comment that do not use third-party apps that store passwords. That's another exploited. Well, there are some services allowing you to kind of a vault to have your password and a password managers. Well, yeah, if that has its own risk if that gets kind of hacked or something. But a lot of people are using those vaults to protect their password. I have one question which is interesting, and I want to bring up to the panel. It says, how do you know when or not to give up data for organizations or job opportunities? I think when you were talking about this, Henry, about and Denise, about the information on the sites, I wish I had that information before, because in my gym application I put everything. If I go to a physician, I put everything over there. Where is that limit? When do you provide that information? At some points, if I do not provide my social in a hospital, they won't do anything for me. So what should we do, or when is it ever necessary to provide accurate information?
That's a good point, Saeed. When it comes to things like official business, your doctor's office, the hospital, the town, the state, right? They're going to require you to give that accurate information, right? You're going to need to, like when I got my driver's license in New Jersey, I had to give them a whole bunch of, but I'm required to do that. So there is a level of risk that does go along with that unfortunately is risk that we simply have to accept in order to live our lives. In the hopes that the state of New Jersey and Michael Garrity and his team are doing such a great job that the New Jersey Department of Motor Vehicles is never going to get breached, right? That's the hope. we know that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when an organization will get breached, but we do our best to prevent that. But so there are cases like that where you do have to give up that information. But realistically, if it's not something that is that important, an official business kind of thing, just don't do it. There's no reason to.
Susan?
So I tell you a story that I moved to Florida, and in Florida, I went to the doctors and they wanted my handprint in order to register me in the system. So I said, yeah, I don't think you need that. And they're like, oh no, we do. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure you can register me somewhere, some other way. And of course they could, right? And they often ask for my social, which I refuse to give because they don't need it. They need your health insurance information and your card. So it's one of those things you have to be really mindful of. What information do they really need? Because a lot of times we don't know, we just assume they need it. So you have to do a little bit of thinking and digging maybe before you get into that situation. And not only that, you have to think, well, if I give that information, how are they going to protect it? Like if I give my biometric, if I give my handprint, I can't get that duplicated. Can I trust this organization to protect me? Well, ironically, maybe a month later, I was going to the lab and they were telling me all about the recent hack where the information had gotten out. So if I'd given my biometric, I might have been at much greater risk. But the challenge is and I'm a little skeptical and mistrusting of authority. So I'm going to challenge that. Right. And so you might want to consider that just because they say they need it, do they really need it?
And I'll add to that oftentimes we can get around things. So I am a member of several shopping organizations because I live out in the country and there's not much out here and I want the bonus perks, right? So I've made up a birth date that is not my birth date and I use it for those organizations. I do use a different birth date where I actually use my right month and I use close to my right year and the first of the month for professional organizations like my CISSP and other things like that, because they do not need to know my exact birth date. They've got the group of individuals I'm in so they can kind of track age and things like that. but they don't ever need to have my exact birthday.
I really want to see the hackers' social profile of you, and the image that they have from you is completely different person. I think this is a good segue to get to the next part of our discussion, which is basically talking about the human factor. At the end of the day, everything gets into human factor, meaning that how we, the consumer or the managers are using. At the end of the day, everything is going to be us providing that information, securing that information, and sharing that information. And I know, Henry, you have done a lot of interesting analysis on human behavior and how it is possible to identify the character or behavior or even understand the character, the person, by some specific traits or some characters. Can you just elaborate on that so we can understand how, for example, the bad actors are approaching and building your persona, if you will, based on the bits and pieces of information that they can grab from my LinkedIn page, from my post on Facebook? So
Sure, absolutely. So let me start by saying that in the world of the human side, right, we have to look at the fact that they are considered an insider threat. There are two types of insider threats that exist. The malicious insider threat, which most organizations have security teams that specialize in defending from the malicious, looking for that malicious intent. But then you have the non-malicious insider threat. So the malicious insider threat is a mad employee who's mad at the organization, who is trying to get back and violates, right? The non-malicious insider threat is that person who simply falls victim to a social engineering scheme because they were unaware, right? Or they were compromised because of an emotional state. And when we talk about the human factor, we need to understand that, in cybersecurity, historically, they want to try to find a technical solution to solve this problem. Well, the truth of the matter is there isn't one. There is no single technical solution that's going to stop a human from making a bad decision. Okay? It just isn't going to happen. So we need to take a different approach. We need to understand what the behavioral characteristics are that people have that lead to them becoming a victim. So things like being absent-minded, being preoccupied, being overconfident. Those are all behavioral characteristics that can lead to somebody making a poor information security decision and becoming a victim to the threat. So we have to understand that. We also have to understand the cultural aspects that exist that influence us as individuals. And simple things like if you have a cultural upbringing where there is an intense respect for authority, you are going to be more likely to fall victim to an authority-based attack where somebody's demanding that something is done. I'm your boss, do it now. Oh my gosh, we gotta do this now. I can't wait, right? Then there's also the sense of urgency that goes along with those attacks. I'm going to make it sound like it has to be done right now or the world's going to fall apart. That sense of urgency. So when you add the behavioral, when you add the cultural, you add the sense of urgency, what we're seeing is that this human problem is a very complex problem. And we as an industry need to do a much better job of understanding what the human is, how the human is susceptible, and what we can do to mitigate that. The current, information awareness training that everybody has to take every year has been around for, 20 years now. And at the end of it, you answer a 10 to 20 question quiz. Yay! And guess what? All of those answers are all over Google. So do you really think the employees actually, they got to get a 70 on it, otherwise they got to redo it. So they're Googling the answers to make sure they get the right answer. They're not really learning anything. I think one of the things that we can do in the community is to kind of work in an interdisciplinary fashion with the psychology and the sociology aspects and try to develop a new form of information awareness training that actually modifies people's behavior using techniques like the cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a psychological technique which does actually change people's behavior. It's used quite well in drug addiction, those kind of things. So that's kind of an approach that I think we need to take. Let's shift our paradigm. I think one of the other more important things that we need to deal with the human side is we need to stop approaching it from the punitive perspective. Right now, you take your IA training, you take your quiz, and woo, you're golden for the year. And then when you fall victim to a social engineering scheme, you're terminated from your position. And the excuse is, we're firing you because we trained you. You should have known. Well, you didn't really train them. You just threw a bunch of information at them and said, good luck. As a security specialist, I personally want them to call me 10 seconds or less after they fall victim. I can stop the attack right then and there. If I don't hear about it for 6 months or a year, it's over. They've already got the data. So if we need to take a proactive approach in the world of cybersecurity, say, hey, you make a mistake, come to me. You're not going to get in trouble. I'd rather have you tell me so I can fix it than you not tell me and we lose data and we get in trouble.
Wonderful. I think this loops back to the concept of security-aware culture. This security and cybersecurity is not a one-man show. It's basically should be a culture within the organization, within the environment, within the university. Suzanne?
I just wanted to share something. You talked about the psychology and the urgency and the training. So I had heard about a British public service announcement. And, a lot of the people that fall victim to these attacks tend to be elderly, or, they think it's their granddaughter called and they urgently need $500, right? So the British public service announcement was, it was very, I thought, effective and very British. They advised people to make a cup of tea, sit down and think about it. Don't do anything until you finish your tea. And I thought that was a brilliant way to approach it.
That's a very good point, Susan. Step back and think. Think before you react, right? As somebody noted in the chat about the emotional aspect of it, right? I didn't really mention that, but that is a huge piece of it too. If I'm able to pull on your emotional strings, I'm going to get you. If I attack your behaviors, I'm going to get you. Okay. So but if we start to teach people, hey, stop, think, assess, and then maybe react, we'll do such a much better thing. And with like the grandparent scheme, when I'm talking to elderly groups all the time, I always tell them, one, don't ever trust it, because guess what? AI will make it sound just like your grandchild now. It used to be you could tell because there was a foreign accent on the line. Now you can't. So come up with a passphrase. Come up with a security code. So come up with a word that only you and your grandchild know. So when they call you on the phone at 2 a.m. and you don't have your hearing aid device in and you can't quite tell what the voice is, you can say, well, what's our passcode? And if they get it wrong, hang up. And and make sure that it's not something that can be looked at on social media at all. It's social media is such a gold mine for the social engineer. It's how I'm going to use it. I'm going to develop my attack against you. I'm going to identify who you are. I'm going to identify your triggers and I'm coming after you.
Going back to Dr. Collier's point as well regarding organizational training for data security, one organization that I felt had a very good training program, they had weekly assessments. You had a weekly, data security was a weekly thing. It wasn't an annual thing. You still had an annual assessment that had to be done and training course over the course of a week. And that was several courses, but every week there was a little video, a little questionnaire, and then on top of that, you also got random phishing emails from the IT department. If you clicked on the link, you immediately had to go into the training course. If you clicked on a phishing link repeatedly, then they would then escalate to more in-depth training and actually sit down and review with you what's going on, why this behavior is bad, and how to specifically, basically a side-by-side training on how to identify a phishing email and the possible risk that this poses, not just to you as an employee, but to the organization at large. That type of training was very, very effective because everyone in the office had those voices in the back of their mind. Whenever I get up to go to the bathroom or get a cup of coffee, I have to lock my computer. Whenever I step away from my desk, if I have any documents that have sensitive information or confidential information out in the open, I have to take those documents, put them into my desk drawer and lock my desk drawer. If I have documents with sensitive information that have to be shredded or disposed of, we have specific shred bins throughout the building that I have to go to and deposit those documents into, because not only am I doing my job, this is part of my responsibility, but if I want to continue to work here, I want the company to continue to stay in business and do well. I want to protect the company from possibly becoming a victim and being the next big headline on the news of a data breach. Because at the end of the day, a data breach is bad because it costs the company a lot of money in order to immediately address the issue, and then 18 to 24 months after the breach, the company may still be dealing with fallout from a specific issue or from a specific breach, such as financial litigation, other things that may come up. So it's not a one-day thing. It's a large problem that happens in the day until the issue is resolved, and then afterwards there's a whole lot of aftermath and a whole lot of cleanup that has to happen behind the scenes. And while that cleanup is happening, that doesn't happen for free either.
Great point, John. Again, this is the culture, the security culture that should be aware. And I want to say kudos to the IT and the CISO team here at Thomas Edison. We do get exactly the same training that you mentioned. We do get a lot of those mini trainings here and there. Also, those phishing, some of the emails that I was some victim sometime clicking on that and say, hey, this was just a test for you to see if you are paying attention. Denise, you have a point.
Just one follow-up. When Dr. Collier mentioned about the threshold that sometimes organizations put for that training, they have to remember too that if they allow the employees to only earn a 70%, that 30% of the questions were missed by that individual. And so there are gaps. And if they don't follow back up with those gaps, and again, not to be punitive, but if they don't follow back up and start to secure some of those gaps, that is where they're going to end up with problems, because it is the weakest link in any type of training and in any situation.
You made a very good point. So that's the thing that I've always had a real big heartburn is why did you put a score requirement down for them to get? Because they're just going to get the minimum. That's what people do, right? And what does that data tell me as the security specialist? Nothing. It doesn't tell me, because I don't know specifically what 30% they are not aware of, what aspects of that 30%. I think as a community, we need to reassess how we assess susceptibility. Instead of doing a 20-question quiz, let's use something else. I developed a tool called the Dynamic Adaptable IA Training Tool that uses behavioral questions, social media questions, and a series of security questions that go 4 levels deep. I want to know how much knowledge you actually know. And I don't care what score you get. That doesn't matter to me, because at the end, that tool sends back to me information about which behaviors you represent, which will cause you to become a victim, which social media behaviors especially, and which security questions did you not get right? Did you answer topic 1 only at the first level and didn't get a level 2, 3, or 4? Those kind of things. And then that allows me as a security specialist to understand where the weakness is. And what I can then do is I can develop targeted training to strengthen that person that goes beyond the annual training.
Thank you. So let me just get a little bit talk about the university's role and the role of academia, making sure the graduates are aware of the landscape and how we can prepare graduates who are ready to get into the workforce. Now, what role do you see universities play in preparing the next generation of cybersecurity professionals? And what are the indicators, or what are the things that universities should make sure, the benchmarks, if you will, that they should basically meet for the graduates to be successful in their job and prepare for the next generation, as we talked about all of these future threats and the growing threats? What is the role of universities? How can we better align ourselves with the dynamic field of cybersecurity and the threats?
We have a saying in the NJ Kick, if you don't know how a network works, you can't defend a network. Earlier in the conversation, we were talking about AWS outage, and it goes back to a DNS error. Okay. How does DNS work? If you don't know how DNS works, you're not going to be able to understand how the internet works. So really the fundamentals, all of these security issues that we have are built on technologies that go back to really 1969, 1979 with the domain name system and those types of things, TCP/IP in the 70s. So really having, I'll call them first principles of how networks work, how operating systems work. All the other stuff is built on top of that, whether it's AI that's built on statistics and math. So again, having, math, physics, and computer science as those first principles are really going to be helpful. And the other part of it is not just learning in a classroom, but experiential learning, doing. Um, because if it doesn't work. It's like going to the police academy and then going out and dealing with real people. It's totally different. So,
Mhm.
dealing in an organization is really different than dealing with an academic environment where it's pristine.
Very
Great.
good points, Michael. I love the fact that you brought up networking. I'm always telling people who want to come into cybersecurity, you better learn how networking works, because that is what we do our jobs on every day. Totally, totally get that. And I completely agree with the experiential learning you talked about as well. I oftentimes will have people ask me, well, can't I learn everything I need to know about being a cybersecurity specialist on YouTube? No, you can learn some really cool things. You can learn some very specific tasks by watching somebody else do it. Yes, but it doesn't teach you to think beyond. And that's what we need in the industry. And I think that's where higher education kind of steps in is, as an educator, I don't want to teach you just a theory. I want to teach you why the theory matters and how to apply it and how to think past that theory when that problem changes, because the threat's going to change. And I want you to be able to predict it, right? Do that predictive analysis through cyber threat intelligence to understand what the next attack is coming down, because you can think beyond the task and the steps that go with that task.
John, do you have any insights in terms of how your education here at Thomas Edison has prepared you for the position that you are doing with respect to cybersecurity?
I started as someone who previously worked in mortgage servicing for some time, and I decided to go back to school to pursue my passion, which was using technology to fix problems. Just because it's fun to do and the sense of achievement is incredible. And if you know, you know. I started my academic journey with Thomas Edison in 2019, and I landed my first position as a support engineer in 2021. Throughout my academic studies, I've learned a lot in terms of not just theory, but also practice. A lot of lab work as far as practicing on cloud platforms, network configuration of specific devices, troubleshooting, and so forth. That in turn helped me for more advanced work and other roles professionally, which is how I landed my position in the data center, where I continue to, again, as Dr. Collier mentioned, learn on the job, learn by doing, learn through being curious and asking questions and being able to dig deeper into how systems work, how things are working in a specific network topology. Because the theory, like others have mentioned, is very nice and clean, but when it breaks in real life and you have a network device that is in California and that affects a client that you have somewhere in the Midwest, and it's 11 o'clock at night on a Friday and they want their network up within the next 2 hours, that's where, you know, the professionalism kicks in. That's where your ability to communicate with others kicks in. That's where all the courses on leadership and being able to communicate clearly, not just over the phone when speaking to clients, but also when communicating to team members and sending those communications to emails to senior leadership and so forth. That's where the academic portion of it really prepares you for it. Because yes, YouTube University can tell you, hey, this is how you can do one cool thing with your network as far as a firewall rule or what have you, one very specific part of it. But in a enterprise or an organization such as Michael's organization, or even for the university's IT team, when you have a problem that needs to be fixed, some sort of outage or some sort of issue, you need to be able to work within a team. You need to be able to properly communicate what the issue is to the appropriate parties. And then on top of that, you need to then turn around and communicate with someone that is yelling at the top of their lungs, hey, the house is on fire, I need help. You need to be able to communicate them and say, hey, listen, the firefighters are on their way. We have the water on the way. This is when everything's going to be turned off. This is when everything will be restored and back to normal. And these are the actions that we're taking right now to address your concerns. And I say IT because it's all information technology. Cybersecurity is just a more advanced, specific niche field once you are much further in and much more experienced and further along in your career path. However, when you start out, you start off in IT, you start off in a help desk position, you start off, you know, doing grunt work and not necessarily the most glorious things as they show in the movies and so forth or on YouTube. But you have to start off in those roles to get that real world experience and in order to properly get a full grasp of the fundamentals. Because without your strong knowledge of the fundamentals as far as networking, you won't be able to work on firewalls or configure an ACL. You won't be able to set up, you know, redundancy between your network devices, between your switches and your routers to make sure that everyone maintains redundancy in the event of one device failing, your network is still up, you know, nothing goes down. So all of those advanced concepts build upon the fundamentals. Your ability to grasp those fundamentals highly depends on how you learn them.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you for the points. And I think you doubled down on Michael's initial point on the fact that it goes to the fundamentals. It is the first principles. We have to, and that is the experience that all the students going through a formal education at a university, going through the curriculum, they will learn about the fundamentals. They will also learn about the details over there. So it's not just brushing over the surface through a very flashy YouTube video and cool stuff that you mentioned, knowing how networks are secured, knowing how databases communicate, knowing how to inject this, how to write a code to communicate with those. So these are the things that you will learn. I want to be cognizant of the time for both our viewers and also the panelists. I have one quick question that might be very helpful for our prospective students. Question is, do I need a technical background to succeed in a cybersecurity program? And is coding experience required for a BS in cybersecurity? So a lot of students are afraid of the cybersecurity programs because of the IT background, technical background that they have to have. Of course, we mentioned that, and also about the coding experience.
So I did not start in a technical field. I started out as a linguist. And so I'd studied, I'd studied languages, and I thought I was going to be, a translator and that sort of thing. And then I ended up at a organization, and they lost the contract, but they had an opening in security. And so that organization already knew me and my capabilities. And that's how I transitioned into cybersecurity. So I didn't come from an IT background. I didn't come from a technical background. In fact, at one point I would have told you I totally hated computers, but here I am today. So I think that it's not a requirement that you have to have all this background knowledge. And the thing that I like most about Thomas Edison in teaching, and I've been blessed enough to have the experience of working with Denise on curriculum development, is that we work on practical skills with the labs, and we're going to teach you what you need to know so that you can succeed and learn these skills. So it's not a requirement, but that will come, and that's our job, is to help you with that.
I've been in cyber a really long time, a little over 30 years. I started a long time ago, and I've seen this occur quite a bit, where people who do not have a technical background want to come into cybersecurity because it's the cool thing and you can make $150,000 a year. Now, are there individuals who don't have a technical background that can come into cyber and be successful? Absolutely. And that comes down to the mentality. Are you willing to put the work in to be successful, right? However, you have to understand that cyber is technical. So if you're coming in without that technical background, you got to make sure you step up and you learn it, because you're never going to be successful. Kind of like what Michael said earlier, if you don't understand how networking works, you're going to have a hard time. If you don't understand coding, you are going to have a hard time, especially if you get into certain areas. If you don't understand just simply how the internet works or how a computer operates, then again, you're going to have issues in the long term. So most important thing is if you're coming into cybersecurity and you don't have a technical background, put the effort in to learn that technical background, right? Because it's so super important for your long-term success. But also you need to be very comfortable with failure. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't like. They get uncomfortable with the idea of being comfortable with failure. in the world of cybersecurity is so complex. There's no way for you to know everything. Okay. You're going to not get it right every single time, first try. And that's okay. You learn from the mistake, you learn from that failure, you adapt, you overcome, you solve the problem. That's what we need to do. And you do it as part of a community. So you ask peers advice. Have you ever seen this problem? Have you ever done this? What would your take be on this? You know, that's a way to solve these problems, and that builds that technical skill set. Can I tell you that I know everything technical about cybersecurity? No, and I've been doing it a really long time. You know, I can code in, I don't even know how many languages now, but I absolutely hate coding. So I don't code unless I have to. I'd rather have somebody else do it for me. But networking, I love. So again, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are also helps.
Denise?
I would add that you don't have to be the strongest, as Dr. Collier said, in each of these different areas, but you need to have a healthy understanding of what each one of those does so that you can liaise between different departments, different people, help to solve a problem, because oftentimes you're going to be working as a team. And those skills that John mentioned are so essential to being able to not only understand what the problem is, but then to start the problem solving prospect. I'm slightly different than everybody in that I personally believe that there is a place in cyber for everybody. You may not be super technical, but one of the things that we can do is we can teach you how cyber applies to the discipline you're in so that you can be better prepared in that discipline. You may not be the one who's going to solve the network problems, but we also need folks who understand psychology, who understand criminal justice, who understand the law. And so there are pivot points for different folks. I would also challenge, though, anybody who's staying out of cyber just because of the math or because of the programming, challenge yourself to solve a problem with those tools. Programming is not this horrible thing that you cannot accomplish. You are capable of doing this. You just have to look at it as a set of tools that are going to solve a problem. And solving a problem with a particular language is important. Will you use that as the only language when you're out in the job? No. I have programmed in so many languages that I'm not even as well versed in, because it's what the problem was presented in or what the language was available to solve the problem in. And you have to pivot. So understanding the bigger concepts and knowing what a program does, how it works, how it flows, how to stay secure, those are the things that you need to know. The actual language is less important, and you can learn that yourself. I mean, there are free resources where you can teach yourself how to solve a problem, but find something that bothers you and attempt to fix it. And that way, you know, you're actually doing something that matters to you, as opposed to an assignment that, no matter how carefully Susie and I try to curate an assignment for you, it's not going to be something that you're invested in love. You're doing it because we told you to. And if you have a problem that you're really trying to master, and then you go about it and solve it through programming, you're going to not only understand the whole troubleshooting aspect of it, but you know what it's supposed to do when it's finished. So you're going to have a better understanding than you would ever get in a classroom. You have to use it. Don't be afraid of it. Just use it.
Great. Thank you. And John, you had a point you wanted to add?
If you're a gamer, you don't stop because you lose. You keep going until you win. And that same desire is the same dedication and hard-headedness that you have to apply to cybersecurity. No one walks into this knowing how to program in 6 languages and understanding networking and how to configure things. No, that doesn't happen. Everybody struggles with one thing or another in the beginning, because just like a game in the beginning, you don't know the rules, you don't know how things work. But if you continue to practice, and this is why I bring up gaming, most gamers can play every day, 6 hours straight. Most people who work in cybersecurity, guess what they do for 6 hours straight? They're studying, they're labbing, they're practicing. If you want to learn how to program, and that's a struggle for me as well, you got to practice it. If you want to get better at networking, you need to review networking documents and practice configuring devices. You need to put that time in on a daily basis, even if all you can do is 1 hour, but you have to practice every day. And that's how you get good.
So we had a question in the question and answer section. I don't know if you saw that. So the question is from Esmaili. Other than CTFs, what other events should students try to attend to gain more knowledge and meet people who are willing to provide information or guidance to pursue security position? That's a very good question. Yes, CTFs are phenomenal opportunities for students to build skills and to make connections, to develop their own network. But there are a lot of other ways you can do that as well. There are security conferences that are conducted, you know, many of them are research-based security conferences. But if you tend to go to them as somebody who's just wanting to sit in there and listen to the presentations, you get to start to hear about the next generation of cybersecurity. What are people really what problems are they trying to solve? But it also puts you in the position to network with those individuals and make connections. Most of my networks that I have now come from those kind of conferences. So those are some options there. But there's lots of ways, try to go and join different organizations like ISC Squared with the CISSP certification and try to engage with what they have available. So just always be open to new things.
Thank you very much, everyone. I want to especially thank our panelists for setting the time, and it was very educational, at least for me. I have a lot of good things and notes for myself to kind of carry over. So I want to conclude our session for today. And hopefully we will be able to continue these discussions all throughout the year, and especially if not next year in our Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So thank you all for tuning in, and thank you all for joining us, the panelists. I truly appreciate your collaboration, your participation, and your great input for this event.